What criminal committed an almost perfect crime, and what was the thing that messed it up? The Dunbar armored robbery, the largest cash heist in U.S. history. A six-man inside job to rob an armored cash depot. They set up a house party as an alibi, used the keys to get into the cafeteria, and waited in there until all employees came in on break, then ambushed and subdued them without firing a shot or raising an alarm. They then loaded the money bags, with over $18 million, into a U-Haul, destroyed the CCTV tapes and returned to the party. Then they sat on the money for 6 months before hiring a crooked lawyer to set up a real estate money laundering scheme to avoid suspicion. 2 years after the robbery, one of the men paid a real estate broker with a stack of money still wrapped in the original currency strap. The broker immediately reported it to the police. After being arrested, he cracked under interrogation, confessed to the robbery, and ratted out his partners. Edit: all the men have since finished their prison sentences, and most of the money was never found, so there's a chance they still won in the end. That's an incredibly stupid way to get caught. It is, but it's also not that surprising. Most of us do really stupid things at least occasionally. These 6 guys would have had to make it their entire lives without any one of them doing anything really stupid. Leaving that this was stolen directly from a bank vault sticker on your stolen cash is a pretty easy one to avoid though. Senator Menendez left bribe money in the envelope and just left it in his closet. He also accepted clearly identifiable, serialized gold bars that just happened to be stolen. He didn't know that, but that's irrelevant. You melt them down FFS. Melting them down and recasting them would have made them practically untraceable. Gold is gold, and there are plenty of places that would pay you cash for it. This is not rocket science. I'm providing these links as examples. All these products can be purchased elsewhere, over the counter for cash if one wants to. When selling gold, jewelers for example prefer that you pour the molten gold into a stock pot of clean, cold water. That produces drops, strings, beads and swirls of gold in various sizes that can be cut up and measured in smaller exact amounts, which are easier to sell. An ingot is more of a take it or leave it proposition, and some people may not have the cash on hand to buy that amount. Larger crucibles and molds are available for larger quantities if that's the way someone wants to go. This is just an example of how to do it. That one dude who robbed a bank by hiring a bunch of people from Craigslist to show up wearing the same outfit he was in, wait outside, he would have gotten away, but a homeless man saw him do a practice run the day before and after the robbery told the police. DB Tuber was the name the press gave him as he escaped on an inner tube down a creek. Anthony Curci is his name, and he wrote a book that was very interesting. He planned his robbery for months. He planned to use pepper spray to subdue one of the guards, and to convince himself it would work he pepper sprayed himself. He also moved boulders out of the creek for months before to make sure his escape path was clear. Tubing down a river seems like a terrible getaway plan. You couldn't possibly think of a more predictable mode of transportation. LOL. How will we catch him? Be at this bridge in 17 minutes. Predictable route, but the F would think a bank robber is using a tube for a getaway. Predictable route, but his plan was predicated on a very fast getaway. He only went up, notably he went upstream, not down, 200 yards, and then came out of the river behind some buildings, was able to change his clothes very quickly, and then hop into the trunk of a car someone else drove him out in. Incidentally, this accomplice was never caught. That is, the tube was basically a smokescreen to make sure no one could catch him getting into the other vehicle. I need this to be referenced in GTA 6 now. The robber had on floaties, sunglasses, a zinc oxide-coated nose, and a hard hat with a pair of straw-accessorized beer cans. Get to the roof, he's going to escape via rain gutters that dump into the creek. Once he hits that ever-flowing waterway between the alley on Fave and the train tracks that need a new crossing light, he might as well be a minnow in the creek for all the good it will do us to be able to find him. That Australian kid who hacked the FBI and put his photos on their website. He scrubbed the metadata from the photo so it wouldn't show the GPS location, then he accidentally uploaded the original with that information still on it. That crime kinda sounds like it should barely be a crime, or at least turn into a job offer. Assuming he only hacked the site to prove he could, and wasn't trying to get in the way of FBI investigations, I'm guessing a kid who could hack their site shows great promise. Though being Australian, he couldn't actually work for them. If a crime is objectively funny, it shouldn't be a crime. Your Honor, it was just for shits and giggles. The legal term for that is lols. The Antwerp diamond heist, the perfect heist of the century where an Italian gang stole 100 million in gems. While leaving Antwerp, they disposed of the disguises and the tools used, but one member of the gang was too lazy to burn everything as instructed. Among the rubbish, the police found envelopes of the Antwerp Diamond Center and a receipt for a sandwich bought at a store close to the center. They recovered video footage of the sandwich store and busted the mastermind of the heist, who didn't give up his mates, but some were later identified. Some of the stolen diamonds are still unaccounted for. Ugh, group projects. Having a receipt seems to be a common way to get caught. I'm pretty sure I saw a documentary on this and they said a dog ate the diamond. If there's one thing I've learned reading this thread is that if I'm ever to commit murders or robberies, I should make myself a sandwich at home if I want to get lunch. Buying a sandwich always gets you caught. Harold Shipman, seemingly a normal GP, turns out to be a prolific serial killer with maybe up to 250 victims over his career. Only discovered when a hospital worker was concerned about the number of cremation forms they had to process for his elderly patients, so very close to going undetected. Damn, he had to be killing a lot of people for the amount of dying elderly people to be suspicious. It's not that he killed them, it's that he cremated them. It's thought he killed at least 250 people. I thought it was because he was changing their wills to make him the beneficiary and a relative cotoned on. You're both right, a doctor became suspicious in the number of cremation certificates, but police were unable to find sufficient evidence. After the investigation closed, Shipman killed 3 more people. The final nail in the coffin, so to speak, is what you are speaking of, where he tried to make himself the sole beneficiary of a former mayor. So, it was the will manipulation that got him caught, but he was under suspicion beforehand with the cremation certificates. Also from his wiki page. Taxi driver John Shaw told the police that he suspected Shipman of murdering 21 patients. Shaw became suspicious as many of the elderly customers he took to the hospital, while seemingly in good health, died in Shipman's care. Wow. Wolfgang Beltracchi, he made millions with forged paintings he painted all himself. He was ultimately caught because he once accidentally used paint that contained a very slight amount of a substance that wasn't used in the days of the original painter. If you're going to deceive people using forged artwork, at least go the route of Hans van Meegeren selling/trading them to Screw with Hermann Göring. But he was found a similar way. A substance that was a major component of his paint mixtures was a 20th century invention. And Meegeren's court case account is rather funny and interesting to me. It was found that he had sold a few of his forgeries to the Nazis, right, and was subsequently court-martialed after the war for colluding with the Nazis by apparently selling genuine Vermeers to them. Had to prove and ended up proving his innocence by painting a good forgery right there in the courtroom. He barely served any time too, basically got a slap on the wrist IMO. If I remember correctly, it wasn't his fault either. He had used the paint before without problem, but then the company added that substance without including it on the product. He was very careful about what paint he used because he knew it would be tested. His story is very cool, but it also proves that there's very little interest in the art world to expose forgeries. Basically everyone involved in handling his paintings made a profit, and the only victims are some rich fucks who are upset the Van Gogh or whatever they bought isn't real. And even they wanted to believe they had the real deal. The backstory he always gave was that the dead father of his wife was a big but unknown art collector whose pieces they'd sell from time to time, which seems like you'd be able to disprove pretty easily if you bothered to dig a little. The guy who created the Silk Road gave himself away by initially introducing the Silk Road to the world from an email address that would ultimately lead investigators right to him. Watched the documentary on this, it was absolutely fascinating. I think logging into his laptop as public place was his mistake because even if he would have gotten caught there was no way, at least very hard, to put him behind bars without he logging into his laptop and giving it to investigators. Yeah, he got caught because he used the Wi-Fi at a local library. A male and female FBI agent pretended to be a married couple having an intense argument. When he looked up from his laptop at them, the man tackled him and the woman grabbed the laptop before he could shut it. Him using the local Wi-Fi wasn't exactly the issue. Him doing that is what made it harder to be caught because he was never on the same IP address. The downside was that it left him out in the open. And like you said, if he had shut his laptop or the screen turned off, they would have had nothing. I think his bigger issue was telling his GF at the time. Because she told her best friend and then she in turn started telling people. They got the guy who co-founded Reddit by waiting/distracting until he left his laptop at a library, then plugging a USB drive in. Who committed no crime and whose blood is on the government's hands. Not that that matters though. I knew a guy who got into selling drugs on the dark web. He had this setup where he'd buy the drugs and package them in his room, ship them through USPS, and collect money through cryptocurrency. He made a lot of money, went on for a while without being caught. They even found fictionalized accounts he wrote about how he was able to do this, including driving 50 miles to make drops. He was caught when an employee noticed he was handling large numbers of small envelopes while wearing latex gloves and reported it. He probably would have gotten away with it if he'd worn winter gloves over the latex. Shit, that's a good tip. Thanks. Get him, boys. Just no deliveries in summer. Israel Keyes is almost certainly the smartest serial killer that has been caught. He studied past serial killers and how they were caught, and so Keyes targeted random people all across the United States to avoid detection with months of planning before he committed a particular crime. He specifically went for campgrounds and isolated locations. He claimed to only use guns when he had to and preferred strangulation. Keyes planned murders long ahead of time and took extraordinary action to avoid detection. Unlike most serial killers, he did not have a victim profile, saying he chose a victim randomly. On his murder trips, he kept his mobile phone turned off and paid for items with cash. He had no connection to any of his known victims. For the Courier murders, Keyes flew to Chicago, where he rented a car to drive 1,000 miles, 1,600 kilometers, to Vermont. He then used the murder kit he had hidden 2 years earlier to perform the murders. He was only caught because he kidnapped a girl and tried to get ransom money from her parents, and law enforcement tracked him down via withdrawals from her bank account and the car he was seen abducting her in on security cameras. The FBI does not even know how many people he killed, so who knows how long he could have kept it up if he had chosen to continue his usual killings. The scariest part about these stories is you don't know who the best serial killers are. You see so many people who got caught over something stupid, which tells me that there are many people who didn't do something stupid to get themselves caught. We still have no idea how many people Bob Durst killed. Durst traveled all over the country, often living in homeless shelters, dressing as a woman, pretending to be deaf-mute. The first disappearance we know of that occurred near Durst was in 1971 when a local teen in Vermont went missing after having shopped at Durst's natural food/vitamin store. 1971, he wasn't arrested on a murder charge that stuck until 2021. He was acquitted of Morris Black's murder and never convicted of his wife's murder. Think of how many people he may have killed. He had millions and millions of dollars. His family knew he was a dog killer and that he killed his first wife, and they protected him. Please like and subscribe for more daily content.